The way that both Callicles and Chaerephon introduce Gorgias to Socrates is that they both say Gorgias claims to have the capacity to answer any question that's put forward to him. And so just like the bits and pieces of the beautiful, the good, and the just, the issue for Socrates is whether or not the seeming or the appearance of things matches up with the being, or we could say the true existence of the thing. And the reason that this is the case is precisely because Gorgias traffics in teaching what he claims to be is an art that can reconstruct or reconfigure any collection of those bits and pieces, which is to say any collection of fragments of the beautiful, the good, and the just. And so he can teach a technology that can reconstruct or reconfigure the bits and pieces of the beautiful, the good, and the just of any political community, which is to say the beliefs of any political community, into whatever he or whoever wields his technology wants that political community to become. In other words, Gorgias's art, his technology, is world making. And so we could say that whereas Socrates traffics in a knowledge that leads one out of the cave, which is to say out of the mere opinion of what things are based upon what is said of their appearance or their seeming from other people, and towards the true being of those things based upon one's own inquiry into those appearances by way of conversation or dialogue with others. Gorgias, on the other hand, traffics in a knowledge that makes one perfectly at home in any cave. And as we're going to see, this is emphatically because Gorgias's art of speaking, his techne of logoi, his technology, is not concerned with whatever the unity of the bits and pieces of the beautiful, the good, and the just constitute in their non-fragmented form. Gorgias's technology doesn't even offer a way to find out what that non-fragmented form of the bits and pieces might be. And all of that is just a fancy way of saying that whereas Socrates is solely concerned with the unity of the non-fragmented bits and pieces of the beautiful, the good, and the just, in order to know if he's truly living the good life, Gorgias's technology isn't even capable of determining what the good life might be. But all of that is a little bit of a spoiler for what Socrates' knowledge is versus what Gorgias's knowledge is. In other words, Socrates' art of speeches, his technology, versus Gorgias's art of speeches, Gorgias's technology. But here we're at the very beginning. We're working our way towards what that knowledge of Socrates looks like versus what that knowledge of Gorgias looks like. And the Greek word that's being translated there as to put on a display is the word epidiexete. And that's just a variation of the more important word for us of epidiexis. And I'm going to explain why that word is very, very important for everything that's going to follow. But suffice it to say that the word epidiexis is a compound of the prefix epi and the stem diexis, which means to point, to show, to reveal. And depending on how that word diexis is being used within any given sentence, the prefix epi attached to it ranges in meaning from on or at or beside to towards, even and including after in the sense of searching or attacking. And so the prefix epi changes the diexis part of the word from pointing or showing or revealing into an emphatic sense of that pointing or that showing or that revealing. And so translating epidiexis or epidiexete as to put on a display is a correct translation. We have to keep in mind that implies a kind of showiness, really like putting on a parade. And so by putting on a display, an epidiexin, what's really meant is that Gorgias is going to parade himself, to parade his ability in front of them as a kind of spectacle. And so the power of Gorgias's art of speeches, his techne of logoi, is that it immediately dazzles his audience. It wows them, which is to say it enchants them with some kind of purchase on the beautiful that is so pleasing, it persuades them on the spot. In other words, it immediately wins them over because there's something inherent in the relationship between the beautiful and the pleasant within the soul of man, such that our tendency is always to believe that the pleasure of the beautiful guarantees full intelligibility. And what we're going to see in what follows in very meticulous detail is that the power of the beautiful, more than anything else, resides in our human, all too human belief that the beautiful promises to satisfy a very particular kind of pleasure of the mind of man. And that's the meaning behind what I had mentioned earlier, that we always seem to want to believe by default that the skin of the good is in fact the beautiful. And what we're going to see in what follows is that Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle provide an enormously rich psychology in their respective attempts to understand this constellation of the beautiful, the pleasant, and mind or intelligibility within the human soul. Socrates says, we want to have a conversation with him because I want to find out from him what power belongs to the man's art, his techne, and what it is that he lays claim to, or we could say what it is that he professes, and what it is that he teaches. So Socrates has come to hear Gorgias, and he wants to have a conversation, a dialogue with Gorgias about what it is that Gorgias claims to know, about the power of Gorgias's art, and that's to say his art of speaking, his techne of logoi, his technology. And Socrates wants to hear what Gorgias professes about it, as well as a description of what he teaches. And Callicles has told us that the power of Gorgias's art of speaking, his technology, is infinite. It can answer anything. And that's to say that there's no problem that Gorgias's technology can't itself solve. What we could say is that for Gorgias, his ability, his capacity, his power to provide showy displays of seemingly full intelligibility about apparently anything has simply enchanted everyone that he's encountered. And so the confrontation between Gorgias and Socrates is the confrontation between beautiful seeming or appearing knowledge, epideixis, and a rigorous pursuit for the genuine being of knowledge by questioning the beautiful seeming or appearance of Gorgias's knowledge at every turn, which is to say through dialogue, questioning and answering. So we have epideixis versus dialectic. And as we're going to see in very meticulous detail throughout, the greatest obstacle in this confrontation is the power of the beautiful within the soul of man. Because we have to keep in mind, the beautiful, showy displays of seemingly full knowledge, epideixis, are not of necessity mutually exclusive to conversation, which is to say, dialogue, dialectic. And the way that this shows itself in both the Gorgias and in Aristotle's rhetoric is that both Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle refer to rhetoric as the counterpart. And the Greek word they both use is antistrophe, a technical term from poetry, but both of them say that rhetoric is the counterpart, the antistrophe of dialectic.